More heartbreak in Hollywood. Longtime TV actor Robert Conrad has died.
He starred in the hugely popular TV series Hawaiian Eye and the Wild Wild West back in the 60s.
Many admirers are gasping at the thought of Robert Conrad attending this reunion. A battery off Robert Conrad's shoulder was once a dare. He did feats that involved jumping from skyscrapers, falling 15 feet onto concrete, and breaking his skull twice. Fans couldn't believe what they saw at his last reunion. He needed assistance to sit down. His speech was slurred and his right side was paralyzed. It was the consequence of drunk driving in 2003, not old age. The tragic life of Hollywood's hardest actor is what we'll be discussing today. A life of anarchy was the beginning for Robert Conrad. His mother, Alice Hartman, was just 15 years old when he was born on March 1, 1935, in Chicago. His father was 17 years old. Yet Alice was no run-of-the-mill young lady. When she was just 15 years old, she became the first public relations director for Mercury Records. She was working with music luminaries, penning press releases, and raising a child in a tenement apartment when other adolescents were cooped up in school. It was an untamed experience that shaped her son's future. Robert, too, made a stunning decision at that age. He stopped going to school. With no prior notice or preparation, he simply departed. He dove headfirst into manual work. Before it was light, he took a milk truck through some seedy areas, avoiding criminals and gangs. After that, he did dock work at Navy Pier, a notorious spot for fights and kidnappings. The next day, he endured sweltering heat as he worked 12-hour shifts in a candy factory. However, he secretly fantasized while he toiled. He took use of the library's acting reference materials and rehearsed his lines in front of a mirror. No one at work suspected that he was unhappy about being confined to Chicago and instead desired the limelight. He took yet another risk when he wed Joan Kenley at the age of 17. She was born into affluence. Her ancestors were from the North Shore neighborhood of Chicago. The young couple fled because they perceived Robert as an ordinary worker from an undesirable neighborhood. Even Robert used a false identity. They went to an Indiana town with lax marriage rules, paid a suspicious judge of the peace $50 to marry them, and then disappeared. After her parents attempted to have the marriage annulled by corrupt means, the couple ran away to California, assuming false identities. It was actually genuine, albeit it sounded fictional. Robert continued to work hard even after becoming a spouse. He performed in many nightclubs around Rush Street in Chicago. But these weren't your average nightclubs. Politicians negotiated deals, mobsters managed the show, and cops took bribes. Robert serenaded everyone. The gloomy halls were crowded with dangerous guys, but Robert was preoccupied with other matters. Sitting in the back, he would watch classic TV series during breaks. Out loud, he would remark things like, "I can do better than that guy," pointing at the movie performers. He fully believed it, even if everyone else thought he was insane. He was so determined to get to Hollywood that he rejected long-term club contracts. Nick Adams was the next one. Even though Adams had gained fame in 1957 with Rebel Without a Cause, he battled unstable moods and an unhealthy lifestyle. Robert was in the midst of a drinking binge, dejected, and on the verge of giving up after a talent agency told him he had radio potential. This was the ideal moment for their meeting. Adams transformed Robert's life after meeting him in a Chicago bar. He gave him $500, equivalent to around $5,000 today, a train ticket to Los Angeles, and even let him sleep on his sofa for 3 months. Adams stayed up with him to practice for auditions and introduced him to casting directors and agents. All of it began with that act of generosity. Finally, the stunt that would determine his destiny arrived. Robert insisted on getting extra money when someone offered him $80 to jump from a horse for a film. This sequence needed 2 lines, according to him. Even if it was brief, it revealed his thoughts. He wasn't content to merely fall. He desired attention. Being both courageous and intelligent was what made him unique. He was known as the person who would take a hit in order to deliver a line because of it. That choice paved the way for many others. Throughout his career, he would do more than 500 stunts solo, relying solely on his own strength and determination. He became famous in 1959 when he earned the part of Tom Lapaka on Hawaiian Eye. He started off with a pitiful salary. Robert Wagner was offered the part, but he declined. Wagner proposed Conrad as an alternative. He needed that break. Over the course of its 4 seasons, 134 episodes were shown. It went viral, becoming more than simply a detective program. To top it all off, he sang on air. He and co-star Connie Stevens were included on a Warner Brothers music CD. Almost immediately, Conrad became well-known all across the world. In The Wild Wild West, Robert Conrad was not initially cast as James West. As a matter of fact, his audition tape ranked 17th. CBS had other, more famous actors in mind, such as Ray Danton and Robert Horton, but they ended up casting Conrad instead, and he received a huge salary increase. In 1965, during the first season of the show, he was paid $5,000 per week. His weekly salary on Hawaiian Eye was only $300 a few years ago. The increase was 1,067%. Incredible as it may seem, he went from being a milk truck driver to help support his family to being one of the highest-paid Western TV personalities. It was as a gamble that paid out for CBS. The show's success was due in large part to Conrad's charismatic yet resolute performance. From 1965 to 1969, he had 4 seasons of steadily increasing salaries. It wasn't all about the money, though. The connection that developed between Conrad and Ross Martin, the show's co-star, was the showstopper. While Conrad provided the physicality, Martin brought his A-game as Artemis Gordon, the cunning gadget genius and master of disguise. Martin added grace, comedy, and dramatic flair. Conrad added action, executing his own stunts, throwing punches, and climbing walls. The two were a wonderful match. They worked so well together that they stayed on for the late 1970s TV movies that CBS made based on the show. But all the enchantment disappeared with Martin's death in 1981. It was impossible, Conrad realized, to get back what they had. Conrad was dead set on performing every stunt by himself, so his dedication to action wasn't an act. He thought it added credibility to the persona. Without a stunt double or stand-in, he performed more than 500 stunts throughout the series. Paying someone $1,300 to do a $150 stunt didn't make sense, he stated. It saved me time, and I could perform a better job. He spent a lot of time training, gymnastics and conditioning to keep up with the demands. Bringing in stuntmen slowed things down. Now he could jump, tumble, and fight like a pro. A few of the antics were downright risky. He was almost murdered by one of them. The Night of the Fugitives aired on January 24, 1968, and Conrad was performing a chandelier trick at the time. A 15-foot fall onto concrete ensued because he had not properly chalked his hands. He had a severe concussion and a 6-inch skull fracture as a result of the collision. He was in critical care for 72 hours and missed weeks of filming because of it. Those 2 weeks were cut from the season. The fall was depicted in the episode as it truly happened because of how realistic it was. He was injured more than once. Once again, he suffered a severe skull fracture. The physicians had to place a portion of the bone in the fridge before reinserting it. He had another near miss years later on the set of Assignment Vienna. He narrowly avoided permanent paralysis after sustaining a neck injury in an accident. According to his doctor, he wouldn't be able to walk again if it had gone slightly further. But he never gave an inch. His entire career was devoted to performing daring acts. The Wild Wild West was revolutionary, but that wasn't all it was about. Genres were fused in a way that had never been seen before in the program. There was a mashup of Western motifs with espionage technology, science fiction innovations, and bizarre horror aspects. The series was a steampunk classic, even before the term was coined. In the Old West, it felt like you were James Bond. You could see the espionage influence all over the program, since creator Michael Garrison had previously purchased the film rights to Casino Royale for a just $600. With the opening title, Night of, each episode showcased Victorian-era science fiction technology, steam engines, clandestine weaponry, and other outlandish devices were technological marvels for the era. Inspiration for writers came from authors like Jules Verne, Edgar Allan Poe, and H.G. Wells. As exciting as the stories were, they were also quite astute. The program established its own niche in popular culture, and its aesthetic shaped subsequent works. According to Robert Conrad, the DA would be a major stepping stone for him in the world of legal drama. He had recently formed a partnership with Jack Webb, the brains behind Dragnet, in 1971. On this occasion, Conrad was not portraying a cowboy or brawler. Rather, he was defending genuine cases from official files as District Attorney Paul Ryan. "I suit up. I feel capable," he told reporters, describing how the position made him feel like a lawyer. "I'm confident we'll have a big hit," he added, praising the casting of Harry Morgan, who he claimed gave the film even more credibility. It failed despite all appearances of correctness. 13 episodes were all that the program had. For Conrad, the abrupt cancellation was devastating. He was disappointed when the show didn't last the 4 years he had planned for, and began to wonder if viewers would ever see him beyond his role as a TV tough man. In the end, he persisted. He gave it another go in 1972 with the TV movie Adventures of Nick Carter, which was supposed to kick off a new series. The part was tailor-made for her. Like in the Wild Wild West, Conrad was able to brawl, punch, and toss people around while playing the role of Nick Carter, a rough-edged private investigator. Stars like Shelley Winters and Brick Crawford were among the many disguises, stunts, and fighting sequences that were included. It was a major chance for a long-term franchise, not a little wager. There was potential and history to the Nick Carter character, which had been around since the 1800s, but the pilot failed. The web was able to pass. Customers were unmoved. Only 6.1 out of 10 on IMDb. For Conrad, it seemed as if he had run into an impasse. Despite expectations that it would be his next great thing, this was his first huge failure since The Wild Wild West. Conrad received a call later that year that altered events, but not to his liking. Following the 1972 Olympic massacre, which prompted the production to relocate to Vienna, Robert Scheider, fresh off his role in The French Connection, decided to leave the espionage series Assignment Munich. Conrad assumed the role of protagonist with the change of title to Assignment Vienna. Playing the role of a suave bar owner who was actually a covert operative for American intelligence, he hunted for spies and troublemakers across Europe. International crime and faraway locales sounded like a great scenario. As he pursued criminals through the cobblestone streets, he donned turtlenecks. ABC had marketed it as part of a triumvirate alongside the Delphi Bureau and Jigsaw, two other detective series under the umbrella title The Men. Unfortunately, problems with the project started early on. In 1973, after only 8 episodes, it was withdrawn from television. It was hopeless, even for Vienna. At about the same time, Conrad's private life was rocked by an eerie and horrific event. In 1971, while he was in Fort Lauderdale, a group of individuals began to abuse him and obstruct his automobile. They said that he used a shoe battery to assault one of their number. Suspensions ensued. With the words, "I don't hit people with shoes," Conrad refuted all claims. "Martial arts are my specialty." Things escalated since he escaped before the cops could reach him, even though he claimed to know how to harm you. The tabloids went ballistic, but he was unable to discuss the matter in depth due to the current dispute. The harm was done, though, according to a buddy who was supposedly a famous bandit. He felt the whole idea was absurd. Many began to question if his real-life demeanor was becoming to blend with his aggressive on-screen character. Later on, a part came along that seemed like a second chance. Baa Black Sheep, which aired in 1976, featured Conrad as Major Gregory "Pappy" Boyington. This wasn't only a fictional figure. Boyington was a genuine Walt hero who commanded the Black Sheep Squadron. Prior to his time in the Marines, he fought in China with the Flying Tigers, downing 6 Japanese planes. The show's advisor, the elder Boyington, referred to it as fiction based on reality. He had been 30 years old during the war, whereas Conrad's version placed him at 35. Tense relationships between a defiant commander and his young pilots pervaded the series, which was raw and passionate. That was successful. At last, he connected with the crowd. He had gone from being a TV bad guy to a hero in the battlefield. However, not even that triumph was without its detractors. To increase viewership, NBC made certain changes to the show in Season 2. One of the 4 female nurses was played by Nancy Conrad, Conrad's daughter. Skeptics and viewers alike dubbed it Pappy's Lambs, and actual Black Sheep Squadron veterans were even more outraged by the idea of women with haircuts popular in the 1970s serving as air station personnel in Watusi. Something was odd. Allegations of nepotism surfaced when Conrad cast his daughter. This was just the beginning. Throughout the years, he frequently utilized his power to get screen time for members of his family, even if it meant compromising the show's integrity. After then, the struggle to preserve Baa Black Sheep's life began. Because of its content, tone, and violence, activist organizations such as Women Against Violence on Television sought to have it removed from television. Conrad refused to budge. He then took it upon himself to personally contact the managers of television stations, begging them to air the show. He brought up the ratings-boosting effects of the Wild Wild West. Yet, that was insufficient. After just 36 episodes, the program was officially ended on April 6, 1978. That struggle was lost by Conrad, despite his best efforts. His portrayal as Pappy Boyington, however, garnered him praise. In addition to his Golden Globe nomination, Conrad took home the People's Choice Award for Best Male Actor. The audience's vote was equally as important as the reviewers, so these accolades mattered a lot. The common people could relate to him and put their faith in the persona. They witnessed leadership, vulnerability, and depth, not just action sequences and stunts. "I dare you to knock this off." Robert Conrad famously stated that in 1977, while standing in front of the camera, clutching a battery. That moment did more than sell batteries. It made him iconic. Despite its simplicity, the commercial caused a national explosion. The tough guy with the ever-ready batteries became well known when it ran repeatedly during primetime shows. The Tonight Show, Carol Burnett, and the rest of the talk programs couldn't help but poke fun. Johnny Carson's parody of Conrad was flattering, as even Conrad confessed. Surprisingly, more people recalled his battery daring than his many years of acting in films like Baa Black Sheep and The Wild Wild West. Conrad wasn't only projecting an image of toughness, he embodied that toughness, and the commercial capitalized on it. His entire professional life revolved on that. Accordingly, the 1977 beginning of the campaign by Eveready was reasonable. They hoped consumers would take their word for it that their batteries were sturdy and trustworthy. There is no one more suited than Conrad to convey that message. He was the message, not only the reader. One variant had him challenging listeners to call it regular, while praising Eveready's alkaline batteries as an upgrade over standard zinc-carbon models. At a time when battery technology was advancing rapidly, it was savvy marketing. More information about the benefits of paying more was required. It was Conrad who convinced them. Eveready and Conrad both benefited from the effort. He was able to maintain a consistent salary when other performers were rushing from duty to role. The commercial aired from 1977 to 1978 and beyond, and the revenue continued to roll in. The ups and downs of working in television are nothing compared to this. He could sit on his hands till something worthwhile came along instead of rushing after every opportunity. At the same time, businesses were eager to partner with him. He gained greater notoriety, security, and, likely, income from that one campaign than from his acting gigs at the time. It was a high point for both Conrad and Eveready, who later captured half of the battery market. His face was all over the place, but at home, everything were coming apart. He got a divorce with Joan Kenley in 1977, the same year he became a commercial icon. After 25 years of marriage, they had successfully raised 5 children. When he was a teenager, she delivered milk and helped out on the docks alongside him. She was there for him even before his name became known in Hollywood. Both ego and celebrity alter reality. Although the marriage had weathered the storm of Conrad's meteoric rise to TV celebrity, it ultimately collapsed under the weight of his own increasing ego and the crushing burden of his relentless success. Silently, they drifted apart. But the scars were deep. Just 1 year after her divorce, Joan passed away at the age of 62. She never remarried. In 1978, a new storm made landfall. Miss National Teenager was presented by Conrad. Lavelda Ione-Fan, a 17-year-old who was formally crowning herself that night on live TV, was approached by 43-year-old Conrad. He inquired about her 18th birthday. From the very beginning, it was a controversy due to the audacity and timeliness that stunned everyone. Still, Conrad refused to give in. After the fact, he quipped to People magazine that it was more like grand theft than robbing the cradle. And they were married in 1983, at the ages of 22 and 48, respectively, Lavelda and Conrad. They were wed for 27 years and raised 3 kids as a couple. The origins, nevertheless, were never forgotten. He spent the remainder of his career in that shadow. The 8 children Conrad had by this point were the product of 5 marriages, his first and second. Difficult feelings, 2 families, vast age differences. His stepmother was younger than several of his elder children, who were technically half-siblings. Every event, from vacations to get-togethers to collaborative films, he managed to pull together. He did his utmost to unite them all, but it was far from effortless. It was an ongoing financial burden to support that many people, children, 2 ex-wives, and a deteriorating job. In the background, Conrad was still dealing with the wounds of his own formative years. He understood the feeling of instability firsthand, because his parents were only adolescents when he was born. Maybe that's why he did his best to keep it all together, even though he knew everything was falling apart. He came up with a novel strategy to maintain his prominence in the 1980s. He turned it into a family company. He began using his children in all of his productions once he founded Shane Productions, which was named after his son. He co-starred with Shane and Christian, his kids, in the 1987 film High Mountain Rangers. He wasted little time in developing a spin-off series using the same actors, Jesse Hawks, 1989, after the cancellation of the original. Despite the short runtime, the message was loud and clear. He was not going anywhere. His daughter Joan was a behind-the-scenes worker, and his daughter Nancy was in a number of films. Everyone was linked, so he hired pals from Chicago. However, getting new blood into the group was difficult due to the tight circle. The series' luster waned with the passing of time, and with it, Conrad's influence in Hollywood. The next chapter was the most gloomy one. Alcoholism was a secret struggle for Robert Conrad, hiding behind his tough guy persona and the weight of his family's reputation. It was a slow-burning problem that began in the late 1970s. Though he was in a downward spiral on the inside, he seemed to be the same man who had taunted you to remove the batteries. He was more irritable, less patient, and a pain to deal with after a few drinks. He and Lavelda's marriage was troubled by his addiction. Arguments sprang out at family dinners. After always being there for his family, the man started to distance himself. Nothing could mend the rifts, not even casting his daughter Nancy in Baa Black Sheep, or collaborating with his sons on Jesse Hawks. His children no longer see him as a hero, but rather as someone battling forces he was unable to vanquish. Once teeming with vitality, his mansion began to seem deserted. The Hollywood seal of approval followed. Will Smith starred in the 1999 remake of The Wild Wild West. That devastated Conrad. He had put his life on the line for that performance. After he fell 12 feet and hit his head during a stunt, the studio stopped contacting him for any future work. That remake, in his view, was more than simply a fresh rendition. It represented Hollywood's progress. An industry that he had a hand in creating has now moved on. With the words, "I'm disappointed," he expressed his displeasure with the situation. "I am not interested in or concerned about Will Smith," he declared. It was obvious that nobody cared, as the previous heroes were obliterated. Since then, Conrad had distanced himself from the majority of individuals. He used his Malibu property as a safe haven. Addiction altered his once thriving social life, which included performing live, making CDs, and singing in nightclubs. He was unhelpful. He severed ties with his loved ones. I lost touch with friends. Even though it was in a picturesque setting, the ranch seemed more confining. Then, on a single terrible night in 2003, it all came crashing down. Time had flown. March 31st, 2003. In the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, Conrad was cruising down Highway 4 in his Jaguar. Aged 68 years old was his official death year. Nearly 3 times the legal limit, his blood alcohol level was 0.22. At about 7:15 p.m., he ran into oncoming traffic and collided with a Subaru. A 26-year-old named Kevin Burnett was inside, on his way home. The impact was so severe. The 2 guys were transported to hospitals via airlift. Burnett was alive but severely injured, while Conrad's condition was critical but stable. Tragically, the man who had portrayed courageous action stars in the past had become one himself. Anatomically, Conrad was hit hard. He was hospitalized for 4 months. He had a brachial plexus injury, which resulted in the destruction of nerves in his arm and neck. He spoke more slowly and had partial paralysis on his right side. A sling and cane were necessities for his mobility. Fans hardly recognized him in court. This formerly strong man now appeared frail and confused. According to his wife, he frequently required a wheelchair and had a 40% use of his left arm. Despair ensued. However, Burnett endured the most excruciating agony. Multiple fractures were found in Kevin's leg. The doctors did their best to help, but nothing ever went back to normal for him. He became immobile, and he became silent. In retrospect, his father noted that he changed dramatically. Kevin passed away in July 2005, 2 years after that, due to perforated ulcers. He had only just turned 28. His loved ones thought the accident was the beginning of his downfall due to the stress, trauma, and health problems he suffered. It only took one decision, one car, to ruin 2 lives. The law descended upon Conrad. He faced 2 felony charges, After initially entering a not guilty plea, he later decided to accept a no contest plea. The penalty includes a fine of more than $600, 5 years of probation, alcohol treatment, and house arrest for 6 months. Nobody could give him a drink, and he couldn't go more than 6 miles from his house. After Burnett's family filed a lawsuit, the matter was reportedly settled privately for a substantial sum. People were wondering if additional charges would be filed after Kevin's death, but Conrad's lawyer put a stop to that, citing double jeopardy. Even his probation was eventually revoked. Although it had ended legally, the guilt persisted. He launched the nationally popular radio show, The PM Show with Robert Conrad, in 2008. There were more than 5 million listeners each week. In addition to taking calls, he interviewed famous people and told anecdotes. His charisma and voice were all that was needed to captivate. The network had high hopes for him as a potential political presenter, but he proved to be too affable. Being authentic, being oneself, was his strength. In 2020, when he went away, his estate was valued at about $10 million. That was far lower than what was anticipated, considering his 8 children and many assets, including his cherished Bear Valley getaway. Dividing up the inheritance wasn't a picnic. He had escaped to the retreat to live off the grid, away from technology and the stresses of everyday life. However, he survived till the very end. He departed from the highlands he formerly inhabited and passed away in Malibu, where he had access to superior medical treatment. At the age of 84, Robert Conrad passed away from heart failure on February 8, 2020. March 1st, the day he would have been 85 years old, was supposed to be a small private funeral. Fans were mourning the end of an era when he passed away, joining the ranks of other legendary TV figures. Losing a guy who had played a role in their lives from infancy and in their ambitions was more than just a loss. It was the curtain call.